And we're live. Good afternoon.
Hi, everyone. Noah Green, good afternoon. Carlos Condit, good afternoon. I'm Frank Forza. This is Everyman BJJ podcast. We're very lucky to have Carlos Condit on here today. A lot of you, if you're a UFC fan, if you're even more, if you're a WEC fan, if you were a fan back then, World Extreme Cage Fighting, Carlos is a former world champion, World Extreme Cage Fighting. He was an interim title holder in the UFC. He fought for the UFC title. Lost a razor-thin decision to Robbie Lawler. We'll talk a little bit about that. But for those who don't know who Carlos is, if you don't know who he is, why should you stay tuned? What's interesting about Carlos that fascinated me is this is a guy who had a lot of options. His father, Brian, was the chief of staff for Bill Richardson. Bill Richardson, who served in one of the United States president's cabinets, was also a three-time governor of the state of New Mexico. So Brian comes from a family where his dad is it piped in very well in the political world, and Carlos had his choice of doing what he wanted to do, and he chose, of all things, cage fighting. And and the other thing that really stands out to me about you, Carlos, is you going back to the early WBC days over a decade ago. You never looked the part, and what I mean by that is that a lot of people, even back then, 10, 15 years ago, had this stereotype of what a fighter looks like, how a fighter talks, right? And you're this guy, you've got the baby looks. You're not a big talker. You're not for the trash talk. But the first time I watched you fight, I think it might have been the John Alessio fight in WEC. The first time I saw you fight, it was like you fight, and I hope you don't take offense to this, but you fight in some ways like a Diaz brother. You have that like a Terminator thing, which was you just coming forward, you're stalking opponents, and you're not looking to win a decision. I'm not saying maybe you evolved, we can talk about that, but you had a very finisher mindset, and you seemed at times impervious to pain. You were willing to take one to give one. And again, a lot of people, when they first laid eyes on you, like, wow, this guy's skinny, because you just look skinny, kind of like a Diaz brother, right? Very different. You have your own style. You're very different from the Diaz brothers. But what you had in common was that I'm going to stalk you. I'm going to get you. You can't hurt me. You've got that stamina for days. You've got that cardio for days. And that was when it made an impression when the first time I saw you, like, wow, this guy's, what I could tell about you then, I was like, this guy wants to win. I could see right away, like, a guy like Dustin Poirier. It's like, when you talk about will to win, your will to win is just really up there, even by elite high level fighter standards. So it's a pleasure to have you on here. We're going to talk about everything from denim jeans. Carlos is probably going to be best known for pushing jeans at some point, I think, than his fighting days. We're going to talk about those denim jeans. We're going to talk about life after fighting, because you took a break there. We're going to talk about life balance. We're going to talk about mindset. So, Carlos, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Well, yeah, I appreciate the intro. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
So let's dive into the Natural Born Killer moniker. That was your moniker. Did that remain your moniker later in your fighting career, or did you drop it?
No, it's still the ring name. It's one of those things like, something from way back in the day that you kind of sticks with you. But no, that's still what Bruce Buffer says.
What is the story behind that nickname? It's the Natural Born Killer. What's the story behind that one?
Well, so I think at that point, or like when it came about, I was young. This was way before the WEC. I couldn't even, I wasn't even shaving. Like I didn't, I was super young. And I think in my first 2 years of fighting professionally, I had like 12 wins by first round in the first round, 12 first round finishes. And, I had more of like a fighting for survival mindset than anything. It was, of course I wanted to win, but I also would fight out of a place of like, well, losing looks like it hurts really bad, and I would much rather, be on the other side of that and just get this thing taken care of. The quicker I can get in there and get this thing done, the quicker I'm out of danger. So, that mindset.
So as we say, the old saying, fighting is 90% mental. And the mindset that you had, you mentioned, hey, Frank, survival, when I was just thinking of it in survival terms, when you win, you get hurt less. That makes sense to me. So I'm out there to finish people. I'm out there to have the quickest night possible, emerge, with the least damage that I can. In terms of mindset, we see fighters and other athletes going to see sports psychologists. We see people, ordering Tony Robbins CDs. Your mindset, was that just you? Was that just pretty much all you?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, and I've talked to sports psychologists more recently. A couple fight camps ago, but no, that was just how I was geared, I guess.
Why did you finally decide to seek out a sports psych? I mean, you had a stretch in the UFC there. First of all, you were just, you are an elite fighter. I mean, if anybody who followed your career, a heck of a career. You were a guy that I'm imagining that a lot of really good fighters were like, I'd rather not fight him. Just in the sense, not that they were scared, but just like, oh man, that's going to be a tough one. Like, this guy's hard to stop. That's going to be a war of attrition. And then you had, you get a little bit older, whatever. You lose the split decision to Robbie Lawler for the UFC title. So that's what's amazing about your story. You're a world champion with WEC. So I consider you a world champion, by the way, for anybody watching. You are a world champion. I mean, the WEC was there. There are a ton of fighters, as we know, from the WEC who crossed over to the UFC and shocked people at, Donald Cerrone, Anthony Pettis, Dustin Poirier, and we could go on and on and on. Joseph Benavidez, Dominic Cruz, Jose Aldo, I mean, Uriah Faber, on and on and on, right? There's so much talent there. So to be the best, even in that division, and then they fuse it to UFC, it's quasi UFC title. But I know that I know before that fight, you're still probably thinking, like, most people don't look at it like that. There is a cachet to say UFC champ for the rest of your life. You get the fight with Robbie, razor thin. I actually had you winning the fight. I did. I'm on social media. I got blasted by people. I think I lost friends over that. Seriously. Like, I lost people who, like, was close with it. They're kind of like, yeah, I had you winning the fight, but you lose that. You're so close to a UFC title. And then after that, you lose 4 more, fighting the best competition, but you lose 4 more. So you lose 5 in a row, which is just very not like Carlos Condit. You're a guy who was just, right there with the best. You could make a close fight of it with anybody before that. You had the close fight with Robbie. Then you lose 4 more. So you lose 5 in a row. Is that when you decided to go see the sports psychologist? And what was your thinking that led you to that?
Yeah, well, it was during that skid where I was losing fights. I was just trying to figure it out. I obviously something wasn't clicking. I had a similar formula that had brought me success in the past, but I was just not showing up fight night. And so I sought out a sports psychologist to see, what can we tweak here, and worked with them. And I actually lost the fight afterwards, but I still think it was helpful. It was part of the process of getting back to where I'm at now, where I'm all in again. I am enjoying it. I want to be there. Fight week, I'm chomping at the bit to fight again, which was a thing that had left me for a little while.
What was your biggest takeaway? What stands out about your consultation with the sports psychologist? What were a couple of takeaways from that?
One of them was basically build each fight as a story. What's the story around this fight? As if I'm you know, and throughout training camp, I'm writing this story, right? If I put every day and every training, every session, everything that I was doing in preparation into into a film or a highlight reel, what would that look like? And that helped a lot. So just having this mental picture of my mind of preparing and what I'm preparing for. So that was part of it. Basically every single training session, every meal, every piece of it was something that I was putting in the bank towards ultimately cashing out in the fight.
I see. So what has shifted for you? You mentioned you're all in again. You really enjoy being out there again. Well, that presupposes that maybe, I mean, if your motivation waned, if you saw a difference, like let's say if you did see a difference, and I'm asking the question, I don't know the answer, but was it like when you lose a razor thin fight like that to Loyler, did that take anything from you in terms of motivation? Did that affect you, your motivation anyway? Your all inness in any way? What was the net effect of that, or the opposite? Did that make you more hungry? What did that do? Because you're right there. You were right there.
Mm-hmm.
I had you win at the fight. What was the psychological reaction? How did you emerge after that Loyler fight? So close. It's like losing a Super Bowl. It's like you're right there, and then boom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it took its toll on me, and I don't think that I was honest with myself about how tough that was. And I kind of just like, whatever, you win some, you lose some, but in reality, it was tough, and I didn't allow myself to feel that, and I didn't allow myself to be like devastated, because I really was. And that spun out in my personal life, and a lot of different stuff kind of went down, and all of that compounded, and I think was a big part of why I've not been I hadn't been the last couple of years performing to the best of my ability and fighting like I know I can.
Now, when we talk in fighting, or we talk in any ecosystem about someone's why, like that's a big thing now. What's your why? And if you have a weak why, then you're not going to have, you're not going to be all in. You're not going to produce the results. Whys can change throughout someone's career, right? Whys can change different seasons of our life, as you just said, with different storylines, right? You can write different new stories. You can write new chapters. Our lives are not stagnant. They don't stay still, right? We can reinvent. What was the original why for you? Because I've always found that fascinating about you. You grew up in a house where your dad is the chief of staff to the governor, right? And you're set up right there. You're set up if you wanted to go into, whatever, be a lobbyist, if you wanted to be a politician, if you wanted to do whatever, business stuff too. I mean, a person who's chief of staff is a pretty well-connected person, I'm assuming. And so you chose a much different path. What was the why fueling you there?
Well, my background, with my dad having a career in state government and politics is, it's not necessarily what you would think. I mean, I come from a troubled background. I was a troubled kid. I fighting was a thing that was a positive in my life that kept me on track from really going down, really going off the rails too far. And my reason was that I loved it. I absolutely loved to fight. I loved mixed martial arts. I loved it before I had ever even competed. From the first time I watched the UFC, I was hooked. I was a fan. I was 9 years old when I first saw the UFC, and followed it all through that time that there was no TV deals, and the dark ages of the sport. And I loved it. I loved it from the first time I stepped into a gym.
You were a high school wrestler. How many years did you wrestle?
Well, I started wrestling when I was 9. I wrestled from 9 until I was about 15 or 16. And then, like I said, in high school, I was troubled, man. I was a wayward kid. Wasn't going to school much. I didn't make grades to wrestle. So I think I wrestled one varsity match, in high school. Just because I was, I didn't, at the time, school wasn't my priority at all.
Now, you're not known for your wrestling. However, you did have a phenomenal, wrestling / judo / some other traditional martial art. You had a great takedown there against Matt Brown, which is going to make highlight reels, and a lot of people raved about. How were you? Because that would have been, once upon a time, that would have been considered a weakness of Carlos Condit. Like, hey, Condit's not. You can put him on his back. He's not a wrestler, right? How did you do when you were wrestling? I know you had the issues with eligibility, academic ineligibility, but how were you as a wrestler in your younger days?
I was tough. Like I wasn't. I don't think I was the most technical wrestler, but I was tough. I did okay. I lost, a decent amount. I think I was a decent wrestler. And when I got into MMA, I was really young, and there was no other kids training at the time. There's no young guys, no guys my size really. And I was training with all full grown men. And when I got into it, I was like, oh, jujitsu, I can beat these guys. Like I can't, these dudes are stronger than me. I'm not going to be able to, overpower them. But I can learn a really good guard game, and I could still win. I could still submit these guys. And so my wrestling took a back seat. And for a long time, that was advantageous. But later on in my career, it obviously became an Achilles heel of mine.
Your father, Brian, when you initially got into, mixed martial arts and your training, what was your dad's response when you told him, I want to fight professionally? Was there resistance there? What was the advice that your father gave to you? Oh, and your mother as well, both of them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, those are two different two different responses. My dad was supportive from day one. When I first started this, I didn't have a car, I didn't have a driver's license, so my dad took me to practice every day. And same with wrestling, same with any other sport that I was involved in. My dad was um, very supportive. My mom was worried. My mom's a health professional. She's a nurse, and of course, she's thinking of all the terrible things that could happen. So no, it was and you got to remember that the sport wasn't what it is today. It was very underground. It was us going and fighting down in livestock stockades down in southern New Mexico, and bars, and very kind of sketchy venues. And so that was it was a different world for sure.
What was interesting about you early on as well is you had your head coach, I forget his name, nice guy, very, very nice guy. And you went against the grain. Not only was the sport, there wasn't a lot of money in the sport. And so, it was a very bold decision for you and any fighter to be like, I'm going to make my living at this, because there wasn't any assurance whatsoever that you'd make any money. But you had, your original head coach, and you can tell us his name in a second, but you had Greg Jackson's, that's supposed to be one of the best, MMA academies in the world. And John Jones is there, and Diego Sanchez, and many others. And yet you still remain loyal for a long time to your original coach. Tell us about that, and what your thought process was, because some people were probably thinking, Carlos is hurting his career. He's got Greg Jackson a couple of miles away. And I think that the gym, your instructor then, the gyms were very, very close to each other. It was like they were, I guess, the Greg Jackson Academy and your academy where you trained were very close. And so, you know, if I remember correctly, you had to kind of drive by Greg Jackson's academy to get to that. So you're driving by one of the best and most hailed academies, but you stayed loyal. Tell us about that, about the loyalty, you know, your coach there, and why you were loyal for so long.
So okay, it's a long story, but so my original trainer was a guy named Tom Vaughn. Tom Vaughn and Arlene Vaughn, who is his wife. She had been a professional kickboxer, world champion kickboxer in the 80s. Tom was actually one of Greg Jackson's black belts. When I first started training, I was training at Jackson's. It was basically just another location of Jackson's that Tom Vaughn ran with Arlene. Over the years, there was a gradual breakup. You know, they changed the name, but we still competed as a team together. And then at a certain point, okay, we're not training with them anymore. They're a separate team. There's been a complete fracture, and there's a fall. You know, whatever. There's a fracture. We are no longer, in the same team. Tom Vaughn and Arlene are fantastic coaches. Some of the best that I've ever encountered, and I know a lot of coaches. They still train. You know, they train Tim Means. They trained Nico Montoya. They train. You know, they trained Ray Borg at a certain point. Fantastic trainers. I stayed with them through till about 2008. And while I was still WEC champion, and ended up going off on my own. I needed to break out. I needed to see other things, and I had I was an incredibly lucky young man to have come across that academy. They shaped the fighter that I was. They took me under their wing personally. They gave me a job, and that's the story there.
Gaido. How do you pronounce it? Gaido Jitsu? Is it Gaido Jitsu?
Gaido Jitsu, yeah.
Oh, it's Gaido Jitsu, not Jitsu, because I saw it, so it's Gaido Jitsu.
I don't know.
Yeah. So I had one of my stories. So back when I was a blue belt, I had a tournament here in Las Vegas, and it had, a bunch of jiu-jitsu athletes, and some jiu-jitsu athletes had wrestling, and then we had a Greg Jackson. Actually, maybe I was a purple belt, but anyway, it was the expert division, because back then, if you went to like Naga or Grappler's Quest, or I think it was a Grappler's Quest, the expert division was 3 years and above, right? So if you had 3 years and above of experience, you could enter the expert division. Of course, a lot of guys would try to sandbag, right? There's guys with 5 years of experience who would do intermediate to try to enter it. But I had my 3 years of experience. I was a fresh purple belt, and there was a black belt in Gaido Jitsu from Greg Jackson's academy. And he was, probably about 15, 20 pounds heavier, and he was a stud. And he submitted me, and I've rarely been submitted in competition. But so he's pretty. I didn't know what Gaido. That was my introduction to Gaido Jitsu. Was like that. This guy's pretty good. You're also, I think, what I saw, you're a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Is that correct, Carlos?
No, I've never actually been belted, other than recently I've been belted, from a 10th Planet instructor. But up till just recently, like a year ago, I've never been belted. When we started out, it was not really, we were so geared towards MMA or Vale Tudo at the time that it was almost, at least the people that I was working with, it was like the whole belt system was seen as too traditional martial art. It was not, it wasn't really their style. So I'm like a purple belt under a purple belt in the 10th planet, under 10th planet system, even though I've been training for 20 plus years.
And you've probably undoubtedly you've submitted black belts and all and so forth. How would you describe Gaedo Jitsu for people who don't know what it is? Like, how would you? I mean, are we splitting hairs here? It's very similar to, say, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. What distinguishes it as a grappling martial art?
I think at the time it was there was jiu-jitsu guys and there were strikers and there was wrestlers. What set Greg Jackson's gym apart at the time was that they were really fusing all these different martial arts together. They had a number of guys. There was a handful of guys who were the pioneers in Albuquerque, and they came from like wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, kempo, and like kickboxing, and basically putting everything together, to what we consider today like MMA. Well-rounded fighters who are strikers and grapplers. I think it's basically just MMA before there was actually well-rounded MMA fighters. Is I guess in a nutshell how I would describe it. But it's not really as relevant today because that's just MMA.
Right. So do you have any interest, whether it be 10th Planet or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? You have the skills. You're a very good grappler. You're a very good all-around fighter. Do you have any interest? Does it mean anything to you? Are you motivated to actually get a black belt in, say, 10th Planet or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Would that mean anything to you? Is that important to you?
I'd be stoked. The thing that I love about what I do, and you asked about whys, my current why is that I continue to evolve. There's still so much to learn. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for over 20 years, and I am still learning. There's still so much to learn. And if in the process I can move up in rank and get a belt, cool. Not super important to me, but continuing to develop my skills and become the best, the best grappler, the best submission fighter that I can be, that is important.
In terms of New Mexico, you've got, whenever you watch the UFC countdowns, New Mexico, first of all, New Mexico is kind of an outlier because even in the early days, in the pioneering days of MMA and UFC, like New Mexico came out of nowhere. Like how has New Mexico happened to be producing or at least attracting the talent? It's just not, California made sense, right? Even Vegas makes sense to have these mega camps, these great camps. Even this part of the, Oregon where they had team, extreme coach, they had Randy Couture and Robert Follis and Dan Hendry. New York might even make sense. Florida might make sense, but New Mexico is kind of like a curveball. Like, how is New Mexico, what is it in the water down there that they're able to, just kind of random, right? To me, at least, it seemed like, what is it about? Was it just Greg Jackson? Like, how were they able to just kind of come out of nowhere and establish kind of a juggernaut atmosphere for MMA athletes? What were the factors that came together that you saw? Because it just seems weird. Like, oh, yeah, go to New Mexico. 20 years ago, it was like that's kind of, well, why New Mexico? Like, if someone told me go to New Mexico, the training's great there. I'm like, well, New Mexico, California maybe. Brazil maybe, Vegas maybe, but New Mexico. What was going on down there? What came together to make that such a great atmosphere to train?
Well, it's a number of things, and I touched on it earlier. Was that Greg brought these different guys together, and there's a handful of guys, and most of them are still in the game. They're still training fighters, and I think they were basically just maybe training in Greg's garage or his basement, and they're all exceptional martial artists, great coaches, and so there's that piece to it, and then there's a tradition of fighting here. Like we've had pro boxers going back for a long ways. We have pro kickboxers, and now that MMA has been has burst onto the stage. MMA has obviously been a big thing to come out of, or I don't know what exactly how to say it, but we've made our name in the MMA world. So that yeah, there's a lot of different things. It's a tough place to grow up. Like people who come from here are used to fighting. They're doesn't matter what part of town you're from in Albuquerque. It's tough. It can be tough, and there's kind of an edge and a grit to people who grow up here. So I think that's part of it. And then we've also been able to attract, or Greg has been able to attract blue chip level fighters like from GSP, Rashad Evans, Nate Marquardt, John Jones now. Alongside the born and raised fighters like me and Holly and like a guy like Diego Sanchez.
Just random question really quick. Let's stay on New Mexico for a second. So New Mexico, one of the visions I have of you is those UFC countdowns where I see you running that hill, right? You got New Mexico is roughly whatever. You have 8,000, 9,000 feet altitude, probably even higher than that. Talk to me about altitude, because you happen to be a fighter who's got great stamina. Some of that's mindset, maybe some of that's genetic. A lot of that's hard work. What role does the altitude play in terms of the cardio giving you a mental edge? Tell me about your relationship with the altitude there in New Mexico and what that does to you as a fighter in terms of your gas tank, in terms of preparation. What's the significance of the altitude for a fighter?
Well, I don't know physiologically how much of an edge it gives you. Albuquerque it's about a mile high, and then we have the mountain that's close that goes up to about 10,000 feet. And so I don't know exactly how much of an actual edge you could quantify that it gives you. But I think mentally, if you think that you have an edge, if you think that training at altitude is going to give you that edge in a combat situation, I think that's huge. And I think a lot like my endurance. I've been an athlete. I've been a full-time athlete since I was 5 years old. I played soccer. I swam I swam every summer from about 5 years old till I was a teenager. I think a big part of my conditioning is just built over time. Probably living here also. Like I said, I don't know exactly the science as to how much of an advantage being at altitude gives you. But I mean, it's I know people get altitude sickness when they come here if they're not used to it. So that's something. So going in reverse, going down to sea level, I do feel fantastic.
When you look at yourself as a fighter, what are, I guess, it's almost like a video game where you can pick the strengths of a certain, player in the video game. But every time there's a certain strengths, every time we emphasize something, it's at the expense of something else, right? There's a boxing game where you can choose to be very powerful, but the fighter might not have the same cardio. If you had to pick the 3 top qualities of Carlos Condit as a fighter, what would they be? And give us an explanation of them.
Sure. Well, I think conditioning. I think that's one. I think maybe creativity. I have a very well-rounded skill set, and I think I mix things up and kind of come at things in a very different from a different approach. And I don't know, maybe heart. I won't stop unless I'm stopped. And I don't know if that's the same for all fighters.
Who do you think is the best MMA fighter of all time, and why?
I think it's John Jones. John Jones, the champions that he's beaten consistently and the duration of his reign as champion. Just from an objective standpoint, John, I consider John the GOAT.
Have you ever trained with him?
John? Oh yeah, I've trained with John for I don't know, like a decade.
Describe the experience of training with John Jones.
John's very he's got a playful approach to sparring. John's quite a bit bigger than I am, but we can work, and we can learn. We can collaborate and we can work on different stuff rather than just getting crushed because he's so much bigger than me. When he first came to Albuquerque, I had more experience than he did. The amount of development that I've seen in John since then has it's been phenomenal. Everybody's seen it. You've seen it as he's competed, but as from a teammate or as a teammate, I've seen it. I've seen him develop his power. I would when he first came out, I had no qualms about standing in the pocket and trading shots with him. As he developed his power, I'm like, nope, that's cool. I'm going to stick with guys my own my own weight class because that's not fun anymore.
What do what's interesting about, and I've actually been I've been a John Jones defender in many ways. Noah has said, we both have said this, we're that sort of the everyman. Part of what everyman means is it's like the hero in every person, the all of the gifts that lie a lot of times dormant in people, but like we're all a work in progress. We're all, as Noah has said, as I have said, we're all John Jones. We're people sit on the sidelines a lot, and John's had his moments, which have not been flattering, but and of course he attracts a lot of criticism then, but he is widely beloved by his teammates. He is a phenomenal fighter. And and someone like you knows that other side of him that other people don't know. People just gang up on him every time he has a low point, and they like to circle him like hyenas or something. But a different John Jones. Tell me about the John Jones that that maybe a lot of people out there, especially his critics, don't.
John is an incredibly hardworking, dedicated athlete. He's talented, but talent doesn't mean anything without the time dedicated to the craft. His the trouble that he's got in over the last however many years is disappointing. I like John as a friend. It's disappointing to see him go through things, but he's continued to get up. Every time he's fallen down, he gets up, and I think that's the measure of a man, not not the adversity, but what he does with it. And like you said, everybody's a work in progress. We don't know where the story goes for any of us. And John's story is very visible because he is a fighter of his caliber and has achieved the greatness that he has. So I mean, it's it's hard to be in the spotlight.
In terms of adversity, we talked earlier about the Robbie Lawler fight, fighting for the UFC title, lost that split decision. Was that the most adversity you faced in your life, or have there been, other adversities that you might talk about and say, hey, I went through this adversity and it gave me this, it showed me this? Was that the most adverse, or was there something else?
Well, I think that fight was the catalyst for a lot of different things, man. I, I quit drinking when I was like 27. I got sober. Um, and after the Lawler fight, man, I got myself in a number of situations, which ultimately led to me relapsing and falling off the wagon. In that time, I messed up my marriage. I went through divorce. I'm just, I'm a couple of years past that and out the other side. But that, like, 2016 was incredibly hard for me.
So Carlos, you're telling me what I'm hearing, if I was to sit here and talk about all the the stuff I went through too, I went through quite a bit of stuff. You were winning fights and you had a great gas tank and you were finishing guys even when you were drinking a lot more than most fighters. You were still drinking. Were you drinking during camps or just off season camp? What was your relationship with alcohol? Even while you were winning fights.
Yeah, no, I was a party animal. Like, when I was young, especially when I was real young, like even in WEC, I would party for months on end. Go in and do a 4 or 5 week camp, and then go out and do a 5 round fight. Because that's just how I operated for a long time. Yeah, and I don't know if I was drinking more or less than other fighters, but I was, for me, it was not a good thing. And yeah, I was still able to operate, but that's how, when I started training, I was doing the same shit when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. All of that had already started, and so it was just what I knew.
So some of the adversities you had, alcohol was a thing, and you had the Loyler loss, split decision right there, this close to being a UFC champion. You had a divorce, and what's interesting about that, I have a divorce as well, and my divorce combined with someone I loved being really sick, combined with financial problems related to the divorce, man, it set me in a tailspin, right? That was like my
Mm-hmm.
tailspin moment in life, where that was like my awakening, where I had to hit bottom, and then when I thought I'd hit bottom, I actually hit another bottom. And I was like, well, maybe this is bottom, and then I hit another bottom, and then, but
Mm-hmm.
that was also where the epiphanies and the aha moments and the awakening came, and the empowerment came. But for you, it seems to me like when there are breakups, when a male fighter loves his girlfriend, when he really loves his wife, and they're a breakup, I've seen that be very devastating to a number of fighters. Was that, when you talk about where that 5-fight losing skid and where you weren't, you go through that, was the loss of marriage, was that a big one for you in terms of in terms of affecting your fighting, affecting your performances?
Oh yeah, absolutely. All of it. I mean, my head was elsewhere. And there's a number of factors, but that was a huge one.
In terms of the in terms of you've won 2 in a row now, beat Matt Brown. I mean, that's a fight. It's amazing that the Matt Brown fight wasn't made sooner. It's just like, it would seem inevitable, however long Carlos Condit's been fighting, 15 years, however long it's been, Matt Brown's been out there forever. And you guys, to my knowledge, you'd never fought. That was a long time coming, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing because in some ways you're fighting a guy, like, it's amazing how similar you are. I actually, no disrespect to Matt Brown, who I've been in the same gyms where we've trained. Matt Brown's always been respectful. But I have Carlos Condit. I think even the resume, I have Carlos Condit as, I liked him in the fight because I'm thinking Carlos Condit is just plain and simple, based on resume, based on just looking at skill set, based on everything, the better fighter. You prove that. But he has a lot of similarities in sort of that kamikaze, Terminator style, the gas tank,
Mm-hmm.
the finisher's mindset. And he, like you, has went through periods of his career where it was like he's done. He lost 4 in a row. Everybody counted him out, and then the guy reinvents himself and goes on a hot streak. So in some way, in some weird way like that, it is kind of like fighting a mirror image of yourself. Like when you get out there and fight Matt Brown. Tell us a little bit about that fight, and I guess the thrill of that fight, why you wanted that fight, what that fight meant to you.
Yeah, there's definitely parallels between Matt's career and maybe even some themes of Matt, in our lives that, that are very, very similar. We had been scheduled to fight twice before, and Matt had got injured twice before. He trains hard. It happens. That's the nature of the game. If you're training hard, it's a fine line between, going overboard and injuring yourself and not making it to the fight, and preparing to and preparing adequately to go out and do a cage fight. That being said, I agree. I felt like I had the better skill set. Matt is he's aggressive. He's strong. He's a physically powerful guy. I mean, now having fought him, I know these things. It's not just speculation. He's a strong dude. He's got a brutal, violent style, and I'm a fan. I've always been a fan of Matt Brown. When before the fight, we're sitting there in the cage. They're about to announce our names, and I was so stoked, super excited to have come through all that stuff and having had that fight canceled twice before, and we're finally there. We made it. Not only, the fans have been excited for us to fight for a long time, but I was too. And at that point, I was just, even through COVID, neither of us got COVID. Neither of us got pulled from the fight. There was a lot of different things that came together for us to actually get there. And I was as excited as I think I've ever been standing in the octagon.
What has fighting taught you about yourself, Carlos?
Oh man. That I'm not unbreakable, but that I'm pretty goddamn tough, and that I can pick myself up again and again and again, and I'm pretty hard to keep down.
Interesting about you, you've always been, I mean, relatively speaking, publicly at least, you've been a man of few words. You don't say a lot. You don't tell the world about how great you are in many ways, especially in a fight world where talking sells fights, and talking, people love the talking, people eat it up. You're almost a throwback, a vintage, a classic, which I let my fists do the talking. You're very much that fighter. Matt Brown is the same way. Right? You are that guy. How come, I guess, tell me a little bit about your your persona, and why have you, because you could make a lot, you could probably, Carlos, make a lot more money if you just exaggerated, talked more smack. Why is that not your thing? And why have you decided I'm not going to do that. That's not me.
Well, I think that everybody's just got to be who they are. I think that, the guys that are good at that, and it's authentic, it reads as authentic, and people cue in on that. When you see people who are trying too hard, you can spot it, and it doesn't, I think there's a number of guys that try to do that, and it's just not real. And I just got to be me, and that's not really who I am. Not if I have legitimate beef with somebody, I may talk some shit, but I for the most part, I respect and have a level of camaraderie with everybody I compete against. Who know, like in the future, I don't know, maybe I'll have an issue with somebody I'm matched against. But up to this point, man, I don't know. That's just not really my style.
Has another fighter ever gotten under your skin with their trash talk?
I'll be honest. This last one with Matt Brown, I guess during the press conference, pre-fight press conference, he was saying that he was going to walk through me, and that I didn't have anything for him, and I was like, really, me? Like, I don't have anything for you? Like, who are you? I think you have me mistaken with somebody else, bro.
Have you ever talked to another fighter during the fight? Like, have you done that? And what have you said to them? Do you ever talk out there?
You know what? It's funny. I saw a clip of me fighting in Japan when I was young, and I forgot about it. But I obviously I wasn't talking to the guy. He was a Japanese guy. I didn't speak Japanese. I don't think he spoke English. But I was taunting him, and I forgot that ever happened. But there's a video of it, and I'm going like this. He was complaining about something, and I was taunting him and basically calling him a bitch for complaining. So there's that happened. I forgot about that. But I don't, for the most part, no.
Do you remember anything anyone's ever said to you? Do fighters talk to you, and what sorts of things, if they do talk to you, what sorts of things have been said to you that you remember during the fight?
What stands out is fighting fighting Nick Diaz. Diaz was in there chatting, talking shit. He, I think he had that famous line of like, "Oh, we're throwing spinning shit now." That stands out in my mind. Him just him talking shit like we were on the schoolyard again.
No effect on you whatsoever, though.
I planned on really trying to stay cool, calm, collected, and not emotionally engaged in that fight. Like I know that's what he does. His brother fought Cowboy like a few weeks before that, and Cowboy was all fired up. Cowboy went out there, throwing the finger before the fight. They were talking shit beforehand, and Cowboy got whooped in the fight. And I saw that, and it was already something that was in my head before, to just not engage, like not engage in that, and just do what I need to do and stick to the game plan.
Now, anyone who's ever watched you fight, and I've seen your career through the entirety of it, you're a guy who fights very valiantly. You've got a giant heart, one of the best in the business, the size of your heart. But I've seen the best of the best behind the scenes, like a week before the fight, 2 weeks before the fight. I've seen them be scared or just not themselves. I've seen it in Anderson Silva. We know that George St. Pierre wrestled with a lot of the anxiety and the what ifs and what if I lose. Even the best fighters are susceptible to that. Tell me about your dance with fear, and what were there moments or fights where you were afraid? I'm not talking about in the cage, because I've never seen you fight afraid in the cage. I'm talking about your mind playing tricks, or your mind messing with you a week before, 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before. Tell me about that. Sure. Dance with fear, and what fears did you have, and what was your mind saying to you? What was that fear saying to you?
Sure. I wouldn't say it's my mind telling me tricks. I feel like it's my mind telling me the truth. I feel like it's a rational train of thought about like what could happen. Like I'm fighting another guy who trains to hurt people in devastating fashion, just like me. And there's the possibility that it's not going to go my way. There's a possibility that it's going to be me who's face down on the canvas. And running through those scenarios, absolutely brings up anxiety. It absolutely makes you question yourself, question your training, the people you're training with, what you've been doing. Um, it's a bit of a roller coaster, and it's different every time, and I don't know why it's different. Sometimes, like this last fight, I had some nerves, not too bad. I've had other fights where I was crawling out of my skin with anxiety, and actually those have been some of the fights that I had my best performances. Before I fought Dan Hardy, I was just crawling out of my skin with anxiety. Before I fought Don Young Kim, I was beside myself with anxiety. A lot of fights, man, that I deal with that. But it's riding that wave, and it's trusting in your training, and it's going out there and believing that no matter what happens, I'm going to compete to the best of my ability. And there's some things that are out of my control. I may get caught with a shot and I may get knocked out. It might not be my night, but I can't dwell on that too much. I have to just go in there and, trust that if I can win, I will win.
Every fighter is different with their trainers. Some fighters, like let's even say a young Mike Tyson with Gus D'Amato, they rely more. Like it's almost like some fighters, and I've seen that more in boxing, where the fighter, like even Demetrius Johnson, sort of exemplifies this. Demetrius Johnson is like what, and I mean this as a compliment to Demetrius, who's one of the all-time greats. It's like whatever Matt Hume says, like Matt Hume is the brain, and then Demetrius is like almost like his little Frankenstein, whatever. He's this little creation. So he's going to do whatever Matt says, exactly as Matt says it. And then you have some fighters like a Dominic Cruz, maybe you, who are Dominic Cruz has, Eric Del Fierro. He's got great coaches, and he's Lloyd Irvin's worked with him. He's got great coaches, but everybody who's worked with Dominic says, man, some of this stuff is just Dominic. Dominic just has his thing, and he's his own hype man. Are you the kind of fighter who leans on your trainer more for the motivation, or when you go through those anxieties, is that just Carlos finds a way to silence that voice, the voices of fear, the voices of anxiety? Is that you, or will you go to your trainer and your trainer can see, hey, Carlos, I can see this is weighing on you. I can see you're a little anxious for this one, and I want to say blank, blank, blank. Some trainers feel the need to build up certain fighters more than others. Do you have that relationship with a trainer, or is it more X's and O's? And, what is that relationship like for you? How much do you lean on the trainer for motivation?
I would say 90% of my career, it's been me. It's been me wrestling with this stuff myself and getting through. I maybe have leaned on the people around me more, like my ex-wife, or my dad, or something like that. I have at times kind of got that pep talk from Greg Jackson, who is phenomenal at that, by the way. But anymore, no, it's just my training with my guys right now, it's a collaborative effort. I've been around this game, maybe as long as they have, and we're in there, and we're developing these tactics and this game plan as we go. But a lot of the mental aspect, as far as wrestling with all that, the fear and the anxiety, that's mostly I take that on myself.
Let's talk a little bit. Tell people about the denim jeans. You've got some jeans out there that are that are comfortable, that are flexible. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the jeans, and why this jean is so great. Because I don't know. Maybe Noah and I should be buying these jeans. So tell us about these jeans and how you got involved, and then how people can get them.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm doing a collaboration with a company called Scene Studios, and they make custom denim jeans, real high quality stuff. And basically it's customized. So however, if you're, tall with, big weight, like whatever your dimensions are, you can basically go in and have a custom pair of jeans made for you that fit correctly, right? And how this came about was they had reached out to me on Instagram. They wanted, wanted to send me a pair of jeans and see, see if I like them, see if I like the concept. And when I got the jeans, I loved them, man. It was perfect because I'm built like, I'm a tall, lanky guy, but as an athlete, I'm kind of, I got thick legs and, a big ass and fit, skinny waist. So I'm always ripping my jeans. They're just not made. They're not made for me. And, so I reached back out to them and I was like, dude, let's do something a little bit more robust and like, create like a partnership here. Because I have this, and if I have this problem, I know a bunch of other guys, a bunch of other athletes, just probably just normal people have a similar, have a similar problem finding clothes that fit them because everything is just made, like basically like a cookie cutter. So yeah, so the dudes at Scene Studios, man, we put together a pretty cool collaboration. We're going to continue to do things, and it's been awesome. And the feedback so far, people love the jeans.
Yeah, you've got me interested because it is, there's a lot of different dimensions to jeans. You can have great material, but they don't fit you right. Then you've got it's just so. I mean, there is a lot to be said for jeans that fit you well, right? Like it's very few, but like when a jean fits you well, it's like, damn, this jean, but then you even got to watch with how much you dry it, or do you air dry it more? It's a lot because you can have your favorite jeans, you dry them too much, then they don't fit you quite the same way. So that
Yep.
I can see where you're a tweener because you do look skinny on the one hand, but on the other hand, like you said, your legs are bigger than a lot of people might expect. You've gotten bigger too. I mean, I remember you when you first started. You were skinny, or you've added a lot of muscle. I
Yep.
guess, Carlos, as we come down the home stretch here, how much longer do you want to fight, and what would you like to get out of this? By the way, really quick, would you ever go into politics really quick, since it's in your blood? Would you ever entertain going into politics?
I don't think that I would get involved trying to like run for office or be an elected official in any way, but the lobbying side I think is interesting, and there's some things that I could get behind in that respect. But I don't know, that may be down the road, but I don't know.
What do you want people to say about you as a fighter whenever it's said and done? You're not done. You're all in. You're excited now. You feel, you're armed with this new sense of purpose. It's fun again. Whenever it is done, 3-4 years, however many years from now, what do you want people to say and remember about you as a fighter?
I want to be inspiring. I want to have inspired people to get involved. I to inspire a whole uh, generation, to become fans of the sport. I get a good amount of feedback from people saying that I was one of the fighters that got them interested in the sport, and that means a lot because ultimately I'm a fan of the sport. It's been it's been a labor of love, and it's been an incredible opportunity to have gone down this path. So I just I want to inspire people in this sport and in the world.
Carlos, Noah Green, thank you so much for taking care of everything behind the scenes with this. Carlos Condit, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you. It's been a long time. I remember writing stories about you, interviewing you way back when, and it's amazing. People counted you out, and it's one of those sort of the hand from the grave moments, right? Don't count 5 in a row in the UFC, 5 in a row in NFL. You could lose 5 in a row in the NFL, and the next year you make the playoffs. 5 in a row in the UFC, 4 in a row. Losing 4 in a row in the UFC is like usually they cut people, but given your stature and your prominence, I mean, but losing 5 in a row and now to come back in the win column again, 2 in a row. I want to wish you the best of luck.
Hey, Frank, before you wrap up, I want to jump in with a question here.
Sure.
And yeah, thanks, Frank. And Carlos, I've enjoyed watching your career over the years. I've been a on the couch watching fan. I trained under Renzo Sapo, Rafael Sapo Natal, gave me my blue belt back in New York. And as I'm watching where you are right now in your career, and from your perspective, what does it look like for you where you stand on the road towards the belt? Now, because I've had the opportunity to sit back and listen to the interview, and I'm thinking in my mind, if I'm sitting next to you and watching you, if you were to portray in a film of how you're going to make this happen, what are the key steps that you see for you to make your way to the belt?
I'm really looking to reinvent myself as a fighter.
Yes.
I have a well-rounded skill set. I've been known as a striker for a really long time. I'm a grappler, and people ask me which part of the sport I love better. Striking and grappling. I cannot tell you. When I fight, I primarily am I'm a striker. I'm looking to finish, but I grappling is really my first love. So really cultivating my wrestling, getting back to a place where where that's a big part of my game, and that's no longer an Achilles heel, but an asset, and then continuing to expand my jiu-jitsu game and get back to submitting people. And I think that's going to be a big part, basically flipping the script. And I always have the striking in my back pocket. I don't think that's going anywhere. But keeping people guessing. I'm developing different layers to my game, and I think that's gonna bode well for my success in the future. And I feel like I can get back into title contention if I continue to develop that.
Yeah, I saw you throw up what looked like a potential leg triangle, but I envision you putting a head and arm choke on someone. Whether it's whether it's James Krause or Vicente Luque. Do you have any word on what you're looking at for your next fight? I can't wait.
I don't.
I can't wait.
I don't know. Yeah, I know,
yeah,
dude.
I can't
Me too.
Wait. I can't wait. That's exciting.
I'm excited. I don't know who. I'm still. We're in. I have yet to sign a new contract with UFC. I expect that we will, but that's still in process. And I think soon after that we'll have an opponent.
Yeah, I mean, to watch you fight, and I just saw you were throwing up so much. When you were on the ground, you were throwing up a lot of potential submission attempts with Matt Brown. I was like, you can tell that he has evolved. And like I said, head and arm choke. I can't wait to see you do it in your next fight. You use that elbow so fantastically. Frank and I started a lot of private lessons, and that's the one move we worked. I don't know, 20 private. We have over 20 hours on the mat of me just studying head and arm choke, and then going back to the blue basement back in New York to show it. So I'd love to see you put it on someone.
Yeah, man. I have a pretty deep repertoire of subs. So I'm excited to get out there and show that, right? I'm excited. I don't know what's next, but whatever it is, it's going to be fun.
Outstanding. Frank, I'll let you do the
Carlos,
close for us. Thank you.
yeah, Carlos, I'm grateful to be reunited. You have an open invitation. I'd love to interview you again. I know you're busy, but I'd love to interview you again and talk even more about some non-fighting stuff as well, because I think you're a very talented guy, a humble guy, a humble champion. So Matt, Carlos Brown, thank you so much for appearing. We wish you the best of luck. We're going to be rooting for you in that next fight. Noah Green, you guys both have a great rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Take care, guys.
All right, take care.
All right,
See you next time. Thank you. Bye.